You think you are free. You have every show, every song, every video ever made sitting in a rectangle in your pocket. You can order food, entertainment, and human connection without standing up from your couch. You spend 3 hours scrolling every night, and you call it relaxing. But here is the question that should make you genuinely uncomfortable. What if your comfort is actually a cage? What if you are drowning your own potential in cheap dopamine because you are terrified of sitting in silence with your own thoughts for 5 minutes? Today, we are looking at a story about a society that destroyed itself not with war, but with too much pleasure. By the end of this video, you will put your phone down. You will finally wake up, my friend. So, let's start with the first question. Why do we run away from silence the second we are left alone with our thoughts? Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World in 1932. And the thing that makes this book so uncomfortable to read right now is that Huxley wasn't imagining a distant science fiction future. He was looking at a direction the world was already moving in and following it to its logical conclusion. He figured out something that the entire attention economy is still figuring out how to monetize. If you can keep people comfortable enough, stimulated enough, and numbed enough, they will hand over everything that makes them human without ever noticing the transaction happened. The world in this book is called the world state, and on the surface, it looks incredible. No war, no disease, no poverty. Everyone has what they need. The streets are clean, the technology is advanced, and every single person you encounter seems genuinely content. You would look at this society and think, someone finally got it right. But here is how the contentment is manufactured. Citizens are not born. They are grown in laboratories, engineered from the beginning, their genes adjusted, their development controlled, and the moment they can absorb information, they are conditioned. Not educated, conditioned. The difference matters. Education asks you to think. Conditioning replaces thinking with automatic preference. While they sleep as children, recordings play in the darkness, repeating the same ideas thousands of times until those ideas become indistinguishable from personal belief. They are made to love their assigned social role, made to find books boring, made to feel vaguely uneasy around nature, made, above everything else, to consume. How did we convince ourselves that being constantly entertained is the same thing as being happy? Because in the world state, nobody distinguishes between the two. The feeling of stimulation and the feeling of fulfillment have been engineered to look identical. You feel pleasure, therefore you are happy. The possibility that there might be a deeper kind of satisfaction that entertainment cannot reach, the kind that comes from building something over time, from loving someone through actual difficulty, from thinking a genuinely new thought in a quiet room, that possibility has been thoroughly removed from the available options. The main tool of removal is Soma. Soma is a drug, but nothing like the dramatic, visibly destructive drugs that ruin lives in obvious ways. Soma is clean. It has no side effects. The moment any uncomfortable feeling begins to surface, any sadness or anxiety, or the low hum of a question you don't want to face, you take Soma. The feeling dissolves instantly. No hangover. No consequences. No residue. You feel fine again, immediately, without having had to deal with whatever was trying to get your attention. Think about it. What do you reach for the moment you feel bored? The moment something uncomfortable stirs? Your hand finds your phone before you have consciously decided to pick it up. The app opens. The scroll begins. Not because you chose it deliberately, because your hand has practiced this response so many times that it has become the automatic answer to any internal discomfort. Smooth, clean, immediately available. The Soma of 2026 has a glass screen and infinite content. What happens when you use cheap pleasure to cure a deep, structural pain in your life? The pain is still there. You haven't resolved it, learned from it, or grown through it. You have covered it with sensation. And when the sensation fades, the pain is exactly where you left it, maybe slightly more insistent for having been ignored. Next time it surfaces, you cover it again. The cycle speeds up. The dose has to increase. The scroll has to be longer. The content has to be more stimulating. because the gap between pieces of content is where the feeling lives. You are not treating the pain. You are training yourself to be faster at running away from it. In the world state, this cycle has been perfected completely. The drug works every time. The pleasure is reliable. And the result is a population that has never sat with a difficult feeling long enough to understand what it was communicating. They are happy the way a very comfortable, very well-fed animal is happy, undisturbed, and completely unable to grow. Why is a prison made of extreme comfort so much harder to escape than a prison made of iron? An iron prison tells you clearly what it is. You can see the bars, you push against them. Your instinct toward freedom has something real to resist. But a comfort prison looks like its opposite. It looks like arriving somewhere good. The person inside it is not straining against restraints. They are sitting in a pleasant room, mildly wondering why they feel vaguely empty, and then reaching for something to make that feeling go away, which keeps them exactly where they are. They also have the feelies. These are the entertainment of the world state, and the word movies doesn't quite cover it. You sit in a seat and you experience the content with your whole body. Sounds, images, and physical sensations, all of it transmitted directly, filling every gap in your attention. There is no emotional complexity, no difficult story that asks anything from you. No art that makes you confront something uncomfortable. There is sensation, constant, optimized, overwhelming sensory input designed to crowd out any space where a real thought might otherwise form. How does endless distraction destroy our ability to do anything actually meaningful? Because meaningful things are slow. They require you to be bad at something before you can be good at it. They require tolerance for the uncomfortable period where you are practicing but not yet rewarded. They require sitting in the feeling of not knowing and trusting that continuing anyway will eventually produce something real. The feelies require none of this. The scroll requires none of this. The payoff arrives immediately, requiring nothing from you, developing nothing inside you. And the more you train your brain to expect immediate reward, the less tolerant you become of the lag that meaningful things require. Not because your potential decreased, because your baseline for acceptable discomfort shifted. Things that used to be manageable challenges now feel unbearable. The attention gets shorter not because it is a fixed resource, but because you have been practicing inattention so consistently that sustained focus feels wrong. Why do we voluntarily hand over our attention to things that give us absolutely nothing in return? Into this world walks John. He is called the Savage, which tells you everything about how the world state views anyone shaped differently. He was born and raised on a reservation outside the system's control. He grew up reading Shakespeare, which means he grew up with stories that take human suffering completely seriously. Stories about love that costs everything, about ambition that corrupts, about grief and jealousy, and the full messy range of what being a person actually involves. He is a person who was raised on the idea that difficulty and beauty are inseparable. He enters the world state and is initially amazed, then horrified. What are we actually avoiding when we scroll through our phones for 3 hours every night? We are avoiding the answer to the question John represents. He tries to have real conversations. He tries to talk about love as something that requires courage. He tries to describe art as something that comes from pain. People look at him with polite blankness. They are not being cruel. They have simply never had a context in which those ideas were relevant. The Soma handles the pain. The feelies handle the emptiness. What possible use is there for art that requires suffering to produce? John meets Mustafa Mond, the world controller, one of the few people who actually understands how the system works, who knows what was given up to build it, and who decided the trade was worth making. And Mond explains it with a calm precision that should land somewhere uncomfortable in your chest. He says people don't want truth, they want comfort. Art requires the possibility of suffering. Real science requires the possibility of uncomfortable discovery. Religion requires grappling with mortality and meaning and the kinds of questions that cannot be resolved with a dose of Soma. The world state eliminated all of it, deliberately. Not because the controllers were evil, but because comfortable people are stable, predictable, and easy to organize. And truth, as it turns out, is almost never comfortable. How does a society die not from violence, but from an overdose of amusement? John makes his famous response. He claims his right to be unhappy, his right to feel pain, to struggle, to grieve, to work through difficult things without chemical assistance, to arrive somewhere that actually cost him something to reach. He wants to be fully human in all the ways that are inconvenient and beautiful and hard. He claims the right to all of it, the mess included. Mond listens, almost with respect, and then explains that the choice was made long ago and nothing is going to change. The conversation ends. The world continues exactly as it was. Because the world state doesn't need force to contain John. It has something more effective. It has entertainment. Why does feeling genuine sadness actually prove that you are still human and alive? Because sadness is signal. It is your interior life communicating something real about what matters to you. You cannot grieve something you didn't value. You cannot feel the ache of loss without having cared about something worth losing. The world state erased sadness, and in doing so erased everything that makes sadness possible, which is love, attachment, aspiration, and meaning. The citizens are not happy, they are numbed. The difference is that happiness knows it has something. Numbness has forgotten the question. John tries to escape the system physically. He goes to live alone, outside the city, trying to build a life of genuine feeling and simplicity and meaning. He wants a small space where the noise can't follow him. The cameras find him. People start watching. His private attempt to live a real life becomes content, the most popular content in the region. His pain, his authentic human struggle, the very thing he was trying to protect from the machine, gets processed by the machine and sold back as entertainment. There is nowhere outside the system to stand. Every real thing he does gets immediately converted into something for other people to consume. His suffering becomes their Soma. He realizes there is no escape. If you turned off every screen in your house today, who would you actually be tomorrow? That is the actual question this book is asking. John already knew who he was. He was a person shaped by difficulty, by stories that took him seriously, by the experience of having felt things fully without the option of chemical erasure. That is why the world state couldn't contain him even when it killed him. He remained himself until the end. The world state didn't build its citizens into comfortable emptiness through force. It gave them everything they asked for. Each individual transaction seemed completely reasonable. This show is good. This food is satisfying. This drug makes the bad feelings stop. Each choice makes sense standing alone. The pattern they form together becomes visible only from a distance. Only when you look at the whole shape of a life organized around the avoidance of discomfort. Let's be honest. Look at your own pattern from a distance. The hours of content you consumed last week. The feelings you avoided by reaching for your phone before they could fully form. The times you sat down to do something difficult and discovered, somehow, that an hour had passed without the difficult thing being started. The silence you haven't been in for weeks, because there is always something to fill the space. The things you meant to build, the person you intended to become, all of it in a waiting room while the feed runs. Huxley is not saying pleasure is wrong. He is not romanticizing suffering or telling you that a hard life is a better life by definition. He is saying that a life organized entirely around avoiding discomfort is not freedom. It is the most sophisticated cage ever built. And it is so difficult to escape because you built it voluntarily, one comfortable choice at a time, and each choice felt like a small, reasonable reward. The Soma takes away the sadness and also takes away the depth. The scroll fills the silence and also fills the space where your real thoughts were forming. You cannot numb the pain without numbing the capacity to feel the good things at full strength either. It is the same switch. The world state turned it off completely. You are somewhere on the dial between full feeling and full numbness, and the direction the scroll pulls you in is not toward more aliveness. John claimed his right to be unhappy. Not because he wanted to suffer permanently, but because he understood that the capacity for genuine happiness, actual deep satisfaction with who you are and what you are doing and who you love, lives on the same ground as the capacity for pain. You cannot selectively numb one without affecting the other. The silence is uncomfortable. Sit in it anyway. The difficult project is slow and frustrating. Work on it anyway. The feeling rising in your chest when you put the phone down is trying to communicate something. Let it. You are not in the world state yet. The cage is not fully built. You can still choose differently, not permanently and perfectly, but in the next hour, in the next moment when the reflex reaches for the phone and you pause and ask what you are actually running from, put the phone down, find out who is there in the quiet. That person has been waiting,